The cold didn't just bite at my skin. It felt like 1,000 invisible needles burrowing straight into my marrow. I curled into a ball inside the sodden cardboard box, trying to make myself as small as possible. My toes had gone numb 2 hours ago. Now they felt like heavy stones attached to my feet. My hands fumbled inside my thin windbreaker, a cheap thing with a long tear down the armpit, stuffing it with old newspapers I'd scavenged from a park trash can. The crinkled paper scratched against my stomach, rough and freezing. Under the sickly yellow streetlights bleeding through the cracks of the bridge above a headline on the front page caught my eye. Real estate market booms, elite scramble for coastal villas. I let out a laugh. It sounded dry and metallic, like rusty gears grinding together. My breath plumed into white smoke, instantly snatched away by the wind, howling through the underpass. The blizzard had arrived. These snowflakes weren't the romantic kind you see in movies. They were little pellets of ice whipping against my face like gravel. I peered over the edge of the cardboard. Across the river, the skyscrapers were still ablaze with light. Those warm golden windows looked like giant eyes staring down, mocking my existence. Memories flooded back sharper than the biting wind. Just 2 years ago, I had sat behind one of those warm windows. It was a small house in the suburbs, with climbing roses on the gate and an old fireplace that always smelled of burning wood. It was Grandma's world, the only legacy she had left me. "Sign it, Maya. You're 18 now. This signature is your responsibility as an adult." My father's voice echoed in my head, cold and steely. I remembered the slick feel of the ballpoint pen in my sweating hand. Mom sat opposite me, refusing to meet my eyes, busy smoothing out the wrinkles on Bella's dress. "Just sign it already," Bella said, popping her gum eyes glued to her phone screen. "I need the money for my Europe tour next month. You're not going to be selfish and hog this rotting house. Are you? Do you know how much rice and money Mom and Dad spent raising you?" I signed, not because I wanted to, but because the weight of psychological manipulation was too heavy for a kid who had just stepped out of adolescence. I believed the sweet promise that after selling the house, we would buy a bigger apartment and the whole family would live happily ever after. But the ink on my signature hadn't even dried when my luggage was tossed into the yard. 3 black trash bags of old clothes. That was all I got. "You're an adult now. Sink or swim." Mom slammed the iron gate shut. The metallic clang severed the last bond I had with them. Inside, I could hear Bella giggling, talking about the beaches in Greece. A violent gust of wind slammed into the underpass, jerking me back to reality and tearing away the cardboard sheet I used as a roof. Snow began to dust my hair white. "Hey, brat, that's my spot!" A booming voice erupted behind me. I jumped, spinning around. A massive man stood there, his beard matted with filth, reeking of cheap liquor. Flanking him were 2 other men, eyeing the wind-sheltered corner I had been lucky enough to claim that afternoon. I was here first, sir," I stammered, my teeth chattering. "There's no first come, first served here. There's only the rule of the fist." He swung his leg, kicking me hard in the hip. Pain shot up my spine, making me curl up. Before I could react, he grabbed my collar, lifted me like a starving kitten, and threw me out into the open. I rolled across the rough concrete, stopping just inches from the riverbank. The black water churned frothing white in the storm. The cold rising from the surface made my lungs feel like they were freezing solid. The man and his cronies laughed raucously, taking over my pile of rags and the cardboard box. I lay there, face pressed against the snow that was thickening by the minute. My body had stopped shivering. I knew that was a bad sign. When you stop shivering, it means your body has given up trying to generate heat. Death was coming soft and numbing. I reached into my inner pocket and pulled out a piece of bread, hard as a rock. This was dinner and probably my last meal. I had fished it out of a bakery dumpster that morning. I brought the crust to my mouth, about to take a bite. Whimper. A soft sound came from beside me. I turned my head with difficulty. A pair of wet black eyes were staring at me. It was a stray dog. Its fur was matted in clumps, ribs protruding clearly under mange-ridden skin. It was shaking more violently than I had been, tail tucked tight between its legs. It didn't dare come closer, just lay there, staring at the bread in my hand with desperate pleading. It was just like me, discarded by the world, beaten down, dying in the winter night. My stomach cramped, hunger clawing at my insides. If I ate this, I might survive a few more hours. I looked at the dog, then at the bread. You're hungry too, huh? I whispered, my voice breaking in the wind. The dog gave a weak wag of its hairless tail and let out a small sound. I sighed, breathing out a thin wisp of white smoke. My frozen hand snapped the bread in two. Crumbs fell onto the white snow. Come here, I held out half the piece. I don't have much, but dying full is better than dying hungry, right? The dog approached timidly, licking my freezing fingers lightly, before gently taking the bread. Its warm tongue was the only heat I had felt all night. I put the other half in my mouth, chewing slowly. It was hard, tasteless, and smelled of mold, but I swallowed it down with salty tears. I pulled the dog close, using my last bit of strength to hug it, and it buried its head in my chest. Amidst the blinding blizzard of the lavish city, two cheap lives clung to each other, waiting for the darkness to swallow us whole. My eyelids grew heavy. The howling wind faded, replaced by a blurry light approaching. Probably the final hallucination before I let go. The light wasn't heaven. It was blinding, clinical, and accompanied by the sputtering cough of a dying metal beast. Two bright xenon headlights tore through the pitch-black darkness under the bridge, sweeping over piles of trash before hitting my face, forcing me to squint in pain. The sound of a car engine roared, then died with a dry choke. White smoke billowed from the hood, blending into the falling snow. A car in this godforsaken, stinking, mud-filled hellhole. The little dog in my arms startled. It struggled to stand facing the strange vehicle and barking. Its bark was weak and hoarse, sounding more like a dry cough, but it bared its remaining teeth, trying to shield me. The car door flew open. Warmth spilled out, carrying the scent of expensive leather, clashing violently with the smell of damp river mold. First, a pair of polished leather shoes stepped onto the filthy snow. Pristine black, not a single scratch, looking completely out of place in the sludge. Following the shoes was a cane made of ebony tipped with gold that glinted under the headlights. An old man stepped out. He wore a charcoal gray wool coat, the collar turned up against the wind. He stood there looking at the broken-down car with helplessness, then coughed lightly, adjusting his cashmere scarf. "Damn it!" The driver's voice rang out as he rushed to open the hood. "Mr. Arthur, the heating system overloaded. The snow clogged the radiator." The man called Arthur didn't answer. He leaned on his cane, turning his back to the wind, his gaze accidentally sweeping over the shadows under the bridge. And that gaze stopped at me. Or rather, it stopped at the dog. It was still barking, trembling all over, but refusing to back down. "Hey, scram you mangy mutt!" the driver shouted, raising a leg to kick it out of the way. "Stop!" The old man's voice rang out deep and commanding, freezing the driver in his tracks. Mr. Arthur narrowed his eyes, walking slowly toward us. The sound of his cane clack, hitting the concrete was sharp and clear. I wanted to back away to run, but my body had betrayed my will. My limbs were paralyzed, glued to the ground as if frozen. I could only lie there breathing shallowly, watching the elegant old man approach like a judge. He stopped 2 feet away. His ash-gray eyes looked at the growling dog, then down at me, a pile of filthy rags huddled on the ground. "It's protecting its owner," he murmured, his voice trembling, not from the cold. "Poor things." He took off one leather glove, reached into his coat pocket, and pulled out several large bills. He bent down to place the money in front of me, a familiar act of charity from the wealthy, who occasionally took a wrong turn through here. But then a strong gust of wind ripped through, blowing the flap of my tattered jacket aside. The car's headlights shone directly on my neck. The cheap silver necklace, tarnished by sweat and time, lay exposed against my pale skin. The pendant was a rose with thorns crude, but with a very specific design, the petals curled to form a broken heart. The old man's hand froze in midair. The bills fluttered from his fingers, carried away by the wind into the white snow, but he didn't care. What? What is that? Arthur dropped his cane. He fell to his knees on the filthy ground, ignoring the expensive trousers soaking up the freezing slush. His wrinkled, trembling hand reached out, touching the necklace on my neck. His touch was warm, making me flinch. In my hypothermic delirium, the old man's image blurred, shifting into the silhouette of my father on that fateful night. "Don't," I wheezed, hot tears spilling out. "Don't hit me. I won't do it again. I'm leaving. Don't hit me." My weak plea struck the old man like a knife to the chest. He froze, breathing heavily, his eyes wide and staring at my mud-streaked face. He brushed aside the matted hair covering my forehead. Right behind my left ear, a small crescent moon birthmark in crimson red was clearly visible. "Sweet Lord," Arthur broke down. A choked sob escaped his aged chest. He pulled me into his arms, squeezing so tight I could hear his heart hammering through the thick wool coat. "Maya, is it you? You're alive!" He screamed, his voice cracking in the wind. "They told me you were dead. Those bastards, they told me you were dead." I didn't understand what he was saying. My consciousness was sinking into thick darkness. I only felt the hot tears of this stranger falling onto my cheeks, mixing with the cold snowflakes. "James, James! Call the helicopter, call an ambulance! Call everyone!" Arthur turned and screamed at the stunned driver, his voice echoing with authority and sheer panic. "Hurry! She's freezing! Get the blankets! Get her in the car! Don't let her die! I forbid you to let her die!" My body was lifted into the air. The little dog barked loudly, running at the driver's heels. The last thing I felt before everything went black was the scent of sandalwood enveloping me, and an old rough but warm hand gripping my frozen one, refusing to let go. "Grandpa is here, Maya. I'm so late. I'm so sorry." There was no cold. That was the first thing I realized. The cold should have been there, clinging to my bones, gnawing at my flesh, like a pack of hungry beasts. But no. Instead, there was a softness, so profound it felt unreal. I tried to open my eyes. Soft, cream-colored light filtered into my retinas, not the harsh glare of headlights, but warm like early autumn sun. I blinked repeatedly, trying to clear the thick fog in my mind. The ceiling above me was impossibly high, decorated with intricate plaster moldings that curved like fairy tale vines. A massive crystal chandelier hung suspended, shimmering with 1,000 tiny fractured rainbows. Where was I? Heaven. If this was death, it was far more luxurious than I had imagined. I shifted, intending to sit up, but a dull ache spreading through my muscles reminded me that this body still belonged to the mortal world. I looked down. I was lying in a massive bed covered in pristine white sheets, smooth as silk. Beside the bed, modern medical machines blinked, with green and red lights emitting steady beeps that reassured my racing heart. The smell. No stench of river mud, no rotting garbage. The air smelled faintly of lavender oil and expensive antiseptic. A primal sharp fear exploded in my gut. Kidnappers. Organ traffickers. Horror stories circulated among the homeless rushed back to me. They took kids like me, homeless, with no one looking for them, harvested kidneys, hearts, corneas, and dumped the bodies in the sewers. No. I ripped the IV line out of my hand. Fresh blood welled up, dripping onto the white sheet in a bright red stain. I didn't care. I had to get out. I stumbled off the bed. My legs were like jelly collapsing onto the thick fur rug. I grabbed the edge of an ebony table to pull myself up, knocking a crystal glass to the floor. Crash. The shattering sound tore through the silence of the room. The large wooden double doors at the end of the room flew open. "Miss, the young miss is awake." A middle-aged woman in a crisp white nurse's uniform rushed in, followed by two maids in black dresses and white aprons. They looked at me with panic, but none dared to get too close. "Stay back!" I screamed, my voice hoarse, grabbing a shard of glass from the floor and pointing it at them. "Let me go! What do you want from me? I have no money. My kidneys are ruined. Don't and don't take them." The nurse raised both hands in surrender, her voice soothing as if calming a wounded animal. "Calm down, sweetheart. No one is going to hurt you. You are safe." "Safe!" I laughed bitterly, gripping the glass shard until it cut into my palm. "Nowhere is safe. Back off." "Maya!" A deep, raspy, commanding voice resonated from the doorway, halting my panic. The servants immediately parted, bowing respectfully. The old man from last night appeared. Arthur had changed out of his mud-stained clothes. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, but his aged face still looked gaunt, his eyes sunken and shadowed as if he hadn't slept a wink. He leaned on his cane, taking slow steps toward me, his gaze never leaving my face. "Do you not recognize me, child?" he asked, his voice shaking with a mix of pain and fragile hope. I looked at him then, down at the glass shard in my hand. "Who are you? How do you know my name?" Arthur didn't answer immediately. He signaled the servants to leave and close the door. It was just the two of us in the vast room. He slowly approached the bedside table where an old silver photo frame sat. He picked it up and turned it toward me. It was a yellowed color photo. In it, a dashing, middle-aged man was holding a 3-year-old girl on his shoulders. Both were beaming in front of a blooming rose garden. The girl had a gummy smile and a crimson crescent moon birthmark right behind her left ear. And around the girl's neck hung a glittering necklace shaped like a thorny rose. The same necklace I was wearing. Memories buried under layers of pain and neglect suddenly stirred. The smell of roses, the deep laughter, the large, steady hands that used to throw me high into the air. "Grandpa, Arthur," I whispered, the name surfacing from my subconscious like a spell. Arthur nodded, tears rolling down his wrinkled cheeks. He stepped forward and slowly knelt on one knee in front of me, a ragged beggar girl clutching a shard of glass. He showed no fear, only boundless remorse. "Yes, it's me. Your terrible grandfather is here." He gently pried the glass from my hand, then took my bloody hand and pressed it against his forehead. "Your parents, they sent me a fake death certificate," his voice choked, breaking. "They said you ran away, got addicted to drugs, and died in a car crash 5 years ago. I believed it. God, I believed those scoundrels, without investigating." He looked up at me, his gray eyes burning with fury when he mentioned my parents, then shifting to extreme tenderness as he looked at the scars littering my arms, souvenirs of brutal beatings. "I lived in agony for 5 years, thinking I had lost the granddaughter I loved most, while you were enduring a living hell right under my nose." My throat tightened. The truth was crueler than I had imagined. My parents hadn't just stolen the house and kicked me out. They had erased my existence to steal my grandfather's love and fortune. They had killed me literally in the heart of my only remaining relative. "I didn't die," I sobbed, dropping my defenses and collapsing into his arms. "I'm still here. Grandpa, it hurts so much." Arthur held me tight, his old shoulders shaking violently. He patted my bony back just as he had comforted that 3-year-old child years ago. I know. It won't hurt anymore, Maya. I swear on the sterling name. From this moment on, anyone who dares to harm you will pay with their life." Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the blizzard had passed. The first rays of the new day pierced through the glass, shining on an old man and his granddaughter, holding each other, weeping in the middle of a palace. I had walked through the gates of hell, and this time I wasn't walking alone. The following days passed like a surreal dream I was terrified I'd wake up from. My body, formerly a map of scars and exhaustion, began to change. I no longer chewed on rock-hard bread. Instead, my stomach, shrunken from starvation, had to learn to accept being pampered. I remembered the first meal at the long dining table. In front of me was a bowl of steaming pumpkin cream soup beside a tray of crispy garlic butter toast. My hand shook as I held the heavy silver spoon. I ate ravenously, spilling soup onto the pristine white tablecloth. Slowly, daughter. Arthur sat at the head of the table, showing no annoyance. He simply pushed a glass of orange juice toward me. No one is fighting you for it. From now on, no one will ever compete with you for a meal again. That sentence choked me up. The spoon froze in midair. For a week, Arthur didn't just have doctors treat my health. He personally taught me how to live again. He taught me how to hold a wine glass without leaving fingerprints, how to distinguish between salad forks and dinner forks, and most importantly, how to look someone in the eye. "Don't lower your head, Maya." He tapped his cane gently on the floor when he saw me shrinking away from the butler's gaze. "When you lower your head, the crown falls. You are a sterling, remember that." On the 10th day, Arthur told me to get dressed. I shed the patient pajamas and slipped into a cream-colored silk dress the maids had prepared. The cool fabric slid over my skin like water. I stood before the mirror, stunned, touching my own face. The bruises had faded. My skin was pink again, and my matted hair had been trimmed into a neat bob. The girl in the mirror looked strange, elegant, yet her eyes still held the haunting shadow of winter nights. "Let's go." Arthur waited at the door, smiling with satisfaction. "I have something to return to you." A black limousine glided smoothly along the coastal highway. I pressed my face against the glass, watching the deep blue ocean stretch endlessly. The car stopped in front of a glass skyscraper, standing like a lighthouse in the city's most expensive district. The doorman bowed low to us. Arthur led me to a private elevator and pressed the button for the top-floor penthouse. The doors opened and my breath caught in my chest. The space before me was overwhelmingly vast. White marble floors reflected the light, but the true magic was the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, wrapping around the apartment, embracing the horizon where the sea kissed the sky. "This is," I stammered. "Your home." Arthur walked beside me, looking out at the ocean. "The deed was put in your name this morning. 24/7 security. No one enters unless you allow it, not even me." He pulled a thick envelope and a brand new smartphone from his suit pocket. "Open it." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a sleek black bank card with gold trim cold against my palm. Attached was a bank statement. I looked at the numbers. My vision blurred. A 9, followed by 6 round zeros. $9 million. I nearly dropped the paper. This sum was larger than anything I had dreamed of in my fitful sleep under the bridge. It wasn't just money. It was freedom. It was a fortress wall separating me from poverty and humiliation. "Grandpa, I can't." I turned to him, my voice shaking. "I don't know what to do with this. It's too much." "It is the capital for you to rebuild your life, and it is your weapon." Arthur's eyes hardened, becoming sharp and cold, the eyes of a merchant who had battled a lifetime in the business world. "Maya, tell me the details. What did your parents do to steal the house your grandmother left you?" I swallowed hard, sitting on the soft velvet sofa. For the first time, I told him everything. Every lie my father told, every psychological blow from my mother Bella's greed, and the night they threw me out into the blizzard. I saw Arthur's hand grip the head of his cane until his knuckles turned white. His jaw clenched, grinding as he suppressed the rage threatening to explode. He didn't interrupt, but the air around him grew heavy, colder than ice. When I finished, the room fell silent. Only the faint sound of waves reached us through the soundproof glass. "They think you are dead or rotting somewhere in a sewer," Arthur said, his voice dangerously low. "Their greed is a bottomless pit, and we will use that very greed to bury them." He picked up the new phone and handed it to me. "Take a picture, right now. Stand in front of this glass. Reveal the ocean view behind you. Post it on social media. Write whatever you want, act like you are enjoying life." "But they'll see it." I worried, old fears rising. "They'll come here." That is exactly what I want. Arthur smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Remember this, Maya. Never mention me. Never mention the Sterling name. Let them think you got lucky with a lottery ticket or found a sugar daddy or whatever filth their minds can conjure. He stood up, walking toward the elevator, his shadow stretching long across the marble floor, like a mountain shielding me. They will come to you, like sharks smelling blood. They will bring flowers. They will bring fake smiles. Open the door for them. Let them walk in. He turned to look at me one last time before the elevator doors closed. Because when the trap door snaps shut, the hunter will be you. The brand new iPhone lay on the cold marble table. The screen glowed, displaying the photo I had posted 3 minutes ago. In the picture, I stood with my back to the camera, my hair in loose waves cascading over my bare shoulders in the silk dress. My hand raised a glass of champagne toward the fiery sunset, dyeing the ocean purple. No long caption, just a location tag: the summit, Royal Residences. My finger hovered trembling over the table. My heart pounded against my ribs so hard I felt like it was counting down to an explosion. Ding! The first notification appeared. Ding, ding, ding. The sounds came in rapid succession, turning into a chaotic machine gun rhythm. The phone began to vibrate violently, sliding across the polished surface. I held my breath and grabbed it. Bella. Queen. What the hell is this, Bella? Queen, where are you? Is this Photoshop? Or are you an escort? Now, Bella! Queen, answer me right now, you freak. Where did you get the money to get in there? And then the screen switched to the call interface. The name Mom flashed on and off like a hazard signal. I didn't pick up. I threw the phone onto the sofa as if it were a burning coal. My stomach churned, a familiar nausea rising in my throat, the feeling I got whenever I heard her footsteps on the stairs back then. Don't be afraid. Arthur was sitting in the armchair opposite, holding a financial newspaper, but his eyes were fixed on me. He folded the paper, the crisp rustle cutting through the silence. Look closely at what they are saying. I swallowed dryly and picked up the phone again. The call had ended, but a new message from Mom appeared. Not curses like Bella's. Mom Maya, my darling daughter. I just saw your photo. Thank God you are safe. I've been sick with worry all week. Where are you? Let Mom and Dad come visit. We miss you so much. I laughed, tears welling in the corners of my eyes. Darling daughter, miss you so much. Those words coming from her mouth sounded more terrifying than any curse. She didn't ask if I was alive or dead in the blizzard. She only saw the location tag: the summit. They've taken the bait, Arthur said, his voice as calm as if commenting on the weather. Greed is the most sensitive compass, Maya. It will guide them to your door faster than any GPS. 3 days later. The smart doorbell system played a soft melody, signaling guests at the lobby reception. Arthur stood up, took the remote, and turned on the 85-inch TV on the wall. The feed from the security camera in the lobby appeared sharp enough to see pores. I stood rooted to the spot, fingernails digging into my palms until they drew blood. On the screen, 3 familiar figures stood at the granite reception desk. My father wore the old suit he usually saved for bank loan applications, trying to smooth his thinning hair to look dignified. But the frayed cuffs and dusty leather shoes betrayed his desperation. His eyes darted around, scanning the crystal chandeliers in the lobby with naked hunger, like a starving wolf spotting fresh meat. My mother stood beside him, clutching a bouquet of carnations, the cheapest kind from the supermarket wrapped in crinkled cellophane. She wore bright red lipstick, forcing a smile at the receptionist, the sycophantic smile I'd seen her use to flatter rich neighbors before borrowing money. And Bella, my sister. She wore a skirt that was too short, holding her phone to record a video, mumbling something, likely live streaming or posting a story to brag. They say they are the family of the Penthouse B owner. The security guard's voice came through the intercom. Miss Maya, do you want us to block them? I looked at the screen. I saw my father surreptitiously touching a sculpture in the lobby, his eyes calculating its worth. I saw my mother whispering to Bella, and both looked up at the high ceiling with triumphant expressions. They hadn't come to visit me. They had come to invade. A chill ran down my spine. I remembered the feeling of being locked in the dark room, the sound of the leather belt striking my skin the night they pushed me out into the snow. Send them away, I stammered, backing up. Arthur's warm, steady hand landed on my shoulder, holding me in place. Look, Maya. He pointed at the screen, his voice hardening. Look closely at their eyes. Do you see love? I looked. Only calculation. Only bottomless greed. If you send them away now, they will come back. They will stalk, harass, and play the victim to the world to ruin you. The only way to end a nightmare is to turn on the light and look the monster in the face. Arthur turned to me. His gray eyes transferred an invisible strength to me. Open the door, granddaughter. I am right here, right behind this wall. I took a deep breath. The air filled my lungs, pushing back the fear huddled in my stomach. I was no longer the beggar girl shivering under the bridge. I was standing in my own fortress. I approached the control panel, my finger no longer trembling. I pressed the button. Send them up. On the screen, I saw my mother's smile stretch to her ears. She turned to high-five Bella. My father adjusted his tie. They stepped into the gold-plated elevator, jubilant, as lottery winners completely unaware that the elevator wasn't taking them to heaven, but straight to their judgment day. Sit down, daughter, my father commanded, seating himself in the head chair, the very spot Arthur had occupied just moments ago. He patted the empty space beside him. We need to have a serious talk. I stood still, taking a deep breath to keep my voice from shattering. What do you want? My mother placed the wilted carnations on the table, right next to a vase of fresh orchids the gardener had replaced just that morning. The contrast was laughable. What do you mean, what do we want? Is that how you speak to your parents? Mother frowned, the wrinkles around her eyes bunching up to reveal naked calculation. We're here to help you. You're young and suddenly coming into a pile of money like this while living alone. It's dangerous. Exactly, my father chimed in, leaning back and crossing his legs. Society is full of scammers these days. You're naive and you haven't finished your education. Let us hold on to the money for you. I'll invest it to turn a profit and send you a monthly allowance. And the house, too, Bella interjected, toying with an expensive perfume bottle on the shelf. It's too big for just you. Mom, Dad, and I will move in. I call the master bedroom the one with the ocean view. You can take the small room, Maya. You're used to suffering anyway. My scalp tingled. Every word felt like a drill boring into my brain. Their shamelessness knew no bounds. They hadn't come to apologize. They had come to take over. They saw me as a placeholder, a living ATM for which they had just recovered the password. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it rang clear in the vast space. The room went dead silent. My father stopped bouncing his leg. My mother narrowed her eyes. Bella stopped chewing her gum. What did you say? My father asked, his voice dropping to a low growl, the tone that always signaled a coming storm of violence. I said no! I held my head high, looking him straight in the eye for the first time in 20 years. I am not giving you money. I am not sharing rooms. And I want you out of my house. Immediately! My father shot up from the chair. The expensive leather scraped against the floor with a harsh screech. His face turned beet red, veins bulging in his neck. The facade of the dignified father vanished instantly, replaced by the drunken, violent monster that haunted my nightmares. He lunged at me. Out of ingrained reflex, I curled in on myself, raising my hands to cover my head, eyes squeezed shut, awaiting the blow. My muscles tensed, the memory of his leather belt searing my skin, resurfacing more vividly than ever. You ungrateful little brat! He roared, his breath reeking of stale tobacco in my face. You think a little money makes you a queen? I brought you into this world, and I have the right to take you out of it. Give me the bank card. Give me the keys. Now. His large, rough hand swung high into the air. The shadow of that hand stretched across the floor, looming over my trembling form. My mother stood with her arms crossed, her lips pursed coldly. Bella held her phone up, ready to record her sister getting disciplined. Time seemed to freeze. I held my breath, waiting for the pain. 1 second passed, 2 seconds. The slap never came. Instead, the sharp sound of a cane striking the stone floor rang out. Clack. It wasn't loud, but it was crisp, heavy, and final, slicing through the violent atmosphere like a blade. "If you dare lay a finger on her," a voice spoke from behind me, colder than the winter storm, "I will cut off that hand myself." The world around me seemed to stop. The slap never landed. Instead, a glossy black object intercepted my father's thick wrist in mid-air. It was a cane made of solid ebony, tipped with gold carved into the shape of a snarling lion. My father froze. His eyes, bloodshot with rage, moments ago suddenly widened. His pupils constricted violently as if he had just seen a monster step out of hell. The cane didn't strike hard. It merely rested against his arm. But the way it appeared, cold, precise, and authoritative, made my father's raised arm tremble uncontrollably before dropping to his side like a cut rope. From behind me, footsteps approached. Clack, clack, clack. Slow, steady, the sound of expensive leather soles hitting marble sounded like the executioner's gavel. I felt a familiar warmth radiating at my back. The scent of sandalwood drifted into my senses, dispelling the suffocating mix of tobacco and cheap perfume. Arthur stepped forward, positioning himself directly in front of me. He wasn't taller than my father. His back was slightly hunched with age. But in that moment, his shadow stretched across the floor, swallowing the three people standing opposite us. "Dad!" The word that escaped my father's mouth wasn't whole. It was a choked, broken sound as if someone were strangling him. His face changed color. I had never seen blood drain from a person's face so fast. From the angry red of fury, it turned paper white, then ashen gray. Beads of sweat the size of peas instantly popped out on his forehead, rolling down his temples. Thud. The bouquet of carnations dropped from my mother's hand. The crinkling cellophane sounded jarring in the deadly silence. My mother stood there, mouth agape, her red lipstick smeared like an open wound. She gripped the back of the sofa to keep from collapsing, her eyes bulging as if they might pop out of her skull. She looked at Arthur like she was seeing a corpse rise from the grave. Grandpa, Bella stammered. Her phone slipped from her hand, landing with a dull thud on the thick rug. The screen stayed lit, the camera pointing at the ceiling, but no one cared about the live stream anymore. Arthur didn't answer. He stood there, both hands resting on the head of his cane, his ash-gray eyes sweeping over each face with chilling coldness. His gaze didn't hold explosive anger. It held contempt, the absolute contempt one reserves for the filthiest kind of trash. "I asked you," Arthur's voice was low, resonating deep in his chest. "Who were you planning to hit with that filthy hand? My granddaughter or the owner of this house?" My father's knees knocked together. He stumbled back a step, nearly tripping over the coffee table leg. Dad, I thought..." He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "They said you were senile, that you were in a home. They told me I was senile, and you told me my granddaughter was dead." Arthur took a step forward. My parents instinctively took 2 steps back, huddling together like rats cornered against a wall. "5 years ago," Arthur said, enunciating every word slowly and clearly as if reading a death sentence. "You brought me a death certificate. You wept, claiming she ran away, became an addict, and died in a car fire, her body unrecognizable. You begged me for money to pay for her funeral. You begged me to sign over the inheritance, because the poor girl is gone." My mother began to shake violently. Tears, real tears of fear, this time streamed down her cheeks, ruining her mascara. She dropped to her knees, clasping her hands and bowing frantically. "Dad, please forgive us. It was a misunderstanding." Back then, Maya went missing. We were afraid the shock would kill you. Silence! The cane slammed onto the floor, making all three of them jump. I am not so old that I cannot distinguish between a misunderstanding and fraud. Arthur pointed the cane straight at my mother's face. I saw her. I saw her huddled under a bridge, starving, freezing, while you lived in her house, spent her money, and lied to siphon off my retirement funds. My father tried to salvage a shred of dignity, but his trembling voice betrayed him. Dad, after all, I'm your son. Maya is my daughter. I was just disciplining her. She is not your daughter. Arthur cut him off, turning to place a hand on my shoulder. His hand was warm, transmitting an absolute protection I had craved my entire life. From the moment you threw her out into the blizzard, you lost the right to be a father. He turned back to the three people trembling on the floor. This morning, my lawyers finalized the amendments to my will. The entire sterling fortune shares real estate trust funds. Everything goes to Maya. Bella's eyes went wide. Her hope for a wealthy life was crushed right before her eyes. She looked at me no longer with mockery, but with envy, mixed with sheer terror. As for you three, Arthur pulled a white envelope from his inner pocket and tossed it onto the floor in front of my father. The envelope slid across the stone, stopping right at the tip of his dirty shoe. This is a court summons. Fraud, forgery, and child abuse. My father looked at the envelope like it was a death warrant. He opened his mouth to beg, but no words came out. And one more thing, Arthur said, his voice cold as ice. The house you are living in. The house you tricked her into signing over. Legally, I was the guardian of her assets when her grandmother passed. Her signature at 18 is invalid without mine. He leaned down, looking straight into my father's face, a cruel smile playing on his lips. I give you exactly 24 hours. Get all your trash out of that house. If I see even a shadow lingering there tomorrow morning, I will have the bulldozers level it, regardless of whether you are inside or not. Dad, you can't do that. Where will we live? We have no money left. My mother screamed, crawling toward Arthur's feet to grab his leg, but he stepped back, looking at her with the disgust reserved for stepping in mud. There's still room under the bridge, I spoke up. For the first time since they entered, I opened my mouth. My voice didn't shake. I looked straight at my mother, the woman who had just tried to use fake maternal love to bind me. The space under the bridge is very wide. Winter is almost over. I'm sure you'll survive. My mother froze. She stared at me dumbfounded, as if she didn't recognize the submissive daughter she used to know. Arthur turned to me, his eyes shining with pride. Then he pressed the intercom button on the wall. Security, come up. Take out the trash. Heavy footsteps thundered from the hallway. Tall security guards in black uniforms appeared. My parents and Bella were hoisted up by their armpits. Gone was the arrogance, gone were the fake smiles. All that remained were gray faces twisted in fear and despair, as they were dragged kicking and screaming out of the paradise they thought they had claimed. The elevator doors closed with a soft but decisive ding. Bella's screaming, my father's cursing, and my mother's wailing were cut off instantly, as if someone had pulled the plug on a noisy television. Silence rushed back in, filling the vast living room. But this time, the silence wasn't scary. It was crisp, clean, and tasted of liberation. My legs turned to jelly. I slowly slid down the side of the sofa, sitting on the fur rug. I didn't cry. I looked down at my hands. They were no longer trembling. I interlaced my fingers, squeezing tight, feeling the warmth and life pulsing beneath my skin. They're gone, Maya. Arthur set his cane aside and lowered himself with difficulty to sit next to me. He didn't sit on the chair. He sat right on the floor with me, indifferent to wrinkling his expensive suit. He took my hand. His hand was rough-spotted with age, but solid as a rock. They will never return. I nodded, taking a deep breath. My chest felt light. The invisible boulder that had crushed my heart for years, the weight of fear, guilt, and manipulation had dissolved. I stood up and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling glass. I slid open the door to the balcony. The sea breeze rushed in, salty and wild. It whipped through my hair, blowing at the loose strands from my eyes. I stepped to the glass railing and looked down. From 50 stories up, the city below looked like a toy model. Cars were the size of thumbnails. People were like tiny ants. And there, right in front of the building's grand entrance, I saw 3 tiny dots moving chaotically on the gray sidewalk. I couldn't hear them, but their body language was loud and clear. The dot in the short skirt, Bella, was flailing her arms, throwing her handbag onto the ground in a rage. The dot in the old suit, my father, was shoving the woman next to him. And that woman, my mother, collapsed onto the pavement, holding her head in her hands. They were turning on each other. When there is no host left to parasitize the parasites, eat their own. I watched the scene, and a strange feeling rose within me. Not gloating, not pity, just distance. They looked so small, pathetically small. They were no longer the giant monsters blocking out my sky. They were just dust specks being blown away by the wind. I turned my back on the railing, turned my back on them. I walked inside and closed the glass door. The sound of the ocean wind vanished. The dots down below disappeared from my sight and my mind. 6 months later. "Miss Maya, is the chicken soup ready? We're starving!" The bright voices of children pulled me from my thoughts. I smiled, wiping sweat from my forehead with the sleeve of my blue uniform t-shirt. The rich aroma of bone broth, carrots, and onions wafted from the giant pot in front of me, completely overpowering the familiar, damp, moldy smell of this old underpass. "Coming right up, line up, little warriors." I ladled the golden hearty soup into clean plastic bowls. Steam rose up momentarily, fogging my glasses. This wasn't the penthouse. This was the Rose House, a social shelter I had established right here at the underpass, where I had once nearly died. I looked at the children eagerly holding their hot bowls. Some were barefoot. Some wore oversized clothes, their skin cracked from the cold. But their eyes now shone with simple joy. A boy of about 8, clutching a small dog in his arms, timidly approached me. "Miss, can I have a little extra for Lucky?" My heart squeezed with a gentle ache. The image overlaid perfectly with my own memory from 6 months ago. "Of course!" I scooped a ladle full of chicken, winking at the boy. "But promise me after you Yadi, you'll go to the literacy class. I promise." The boy grinned, showing a missing tooth, and dashed back to his seat. I stood up straight, stretching my back. My spine ached and my legs were numb from standing, but I had never felt so alive. $9 million in a bank account didn't make me as happy as seeing these clean bowls. Money wasn't just for buying designer bags or lavish parties. Money was a tool to rebuild broken bridges, to ensure no one had to share a moldy piece of bread in the winter night ever again. "You're doing good work." Arthur was standing in the corner, leaning on his cane. He wasn't wearing his usual sharp suit, but a simple turtleneck sweater and a beret. He looked at me, his eyes twinkling with unconcealed pride. I took off my apron and walked over to him, linking my arm with his as we stepped out of the noisy kitchen area. "Do you think I'm making a loss on this investment, Grandpa?" I teased. "It's a huge profit," Arthur chuckled, patting the back of my hand. "The profit is your smile and the future of those children. It's the best bargain of my life." We walked along the riverbank. The embankment, once littered with trash, was now cleaned up, paved with smooth bricks, and planted with thorny rose bushes budding with new life. The sun began to set. The brilliant sunset dyed the river surface red, turning the once black water into a ribbon of shimmering gold. The wind blew cold, but no longer biting. I touched my neck. The rose pendant still rested there, warm against my skin. I once thought I was a speck of dust forgotten under a bridge. But Grandpa had come, dusted me off, and showed me that even in the mud, a rose can still rise and bloom. "Let's go home, Maya," Arthur said. "The chef is making that beef stew you like tonight." "Yes, let's go home." I squeezed his hand tight. Together we walked toward the waiting car, leaving the darkness behind us. And I knew, no matter how stormy tomorrow might be, I would never be cold again. Because I had found my eternal flame, the warmth of family, and the power of giving.